Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Doing this.
Oh, really?
Hey, see? Oh, yeah.
Thank you, sir.
When I get through doing this, I'm going into recycle business. Like that's some stack stuff that. You do too, probably now.
Yeah.
So everything wrong.
Have stacks. I can't get a page, so.
Oh, it's that thing you got there? Well, I didn't bring mine. They said,
Oh,
yeah.
let's see if I've got it. It did have. Good, it's good. It's there. It's there. Good. I can't get anything.
All right, good evening. Welcome to Oconee County Board of Commissioners meeting. Today is Tuesday, December the 6th, 2022. If you're joining us virtually to comment during the public comment portions of the meeting, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom. After a moment of silence, we're going to ask Commissioner Horton to lead us in the pledge to the flag. Please stand. Thank you. The first item of business is to approve the agenda.
Make a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
Second.
Have a motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. Next item is any statements and remarks from citizens. This is for anything not on the agenda tonight. Anyone virtually? Thank you. Any statements or remarks from commissioners? Just a couple announcements about the holiday schedule. Oconee County Government Office will be closed on the following days. This will be Friday, December 23rd for Christmas Eve, Monday, December 26th for Christmas Day. Also Monday, January 2nd for New Year's Day. Also this Wednesday from noon to 2, all offices will be closed for their Christmas celebration. And also our December 27th work session is officially canceled. So there'll be no more meetings for the rest of 2022. Next time is approval of the minutes. This is for our goal setting meeting on October 27th, regular meeting November 1st, town hall November 16th, and agenda setting meeting on November 29th.
Chairman, I make a motion, we approve the goal setting meeting, the regular meeting, town hall meeting, and the agenda setting meeting as submitted.
Second.
You have a motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. Next item is Spectrum or Charter Spectrum's presentation to the Oconee County 4-H Club. Catherine.
Thank you, commissioners, for having me here tonight. I'm Catherine Fleming. I'm our state director for Charter Communications, which is the parent company of Spectrum. We are excited tonight to announce a partnership with the Oconee County 4-H and a donation earmarked for their Tech Change Makers program. And we'll also get to hear from 2 4-H students about what this program is. So to begin, I'd like to thank our 4-H leaders who have joined us today. We have Daniel Queen, who's our 4-H educator for Oconee County, Adam Hammond, the interim foundation executive director, Casey Bozeman, our extension 4-H specialist, and Katie Bowker. And we also have 2 4-H students with us tonight, Alyssa Haig and Lexi Pritchard. So earlier this year, Charter supported the Catoosa County 4-H program through a Spectrum Digital Education Grant, and we're thrilled to continue this support in more areas in our Georgia footprint. As y'all know, Spectrum is committed to closing the digital divide, not just by expanding our footprint like we are doing in the county, but also by partnering with organizations such as Georgia 4-H and the Oconee County Extension Program. Today, we're thrilled to present a $5,000 donation earmarked for Oconee's 4-H Tech Change Makers, a program empowering 4-H youth to teach digital literacy skills, ultimately helping adults and seniors find jobs, connect with family online, and understand remote work and how to access or adopt new technologies. So if it is okay, I'd like to invite some of our 4-H friends up to receive this check and tell you a little bit about the program. So Daniel, Alyssa, and Lexi, if y'all wouldn't mind joining me up here. Thank you. And Daniel, this is for y'all.
Thank
So
you very
thank
much.
you. That's the real one. You can't take that.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Awesome. Well, thank y'all for having us again today. We love coming out here to the Board of Commissioners and brought two of our shining star 4-Hers that are able here to kind of talk a little bit about the program and just express their gratitude for y'all hosting us and our thank you to Charter for being able to donate this amount of money and keeping your continued support with us. And it means a lot to us as a whole and on behalf of the 4-H process. Thank you for that. I'll introduce our first speaker. So Lexi Pritchard, she'll thank a couple people, and then Alyssa Haig will talk about the program.
Thank you, Daniel, for our introduction. First, we wanted to take a moment to express our thanks to those who are in attendance with us tonight, including the charter representatives, Catherine Fleming and Leah Brown, Casey Bozeman, Extension 4-H Specialist for the Science Programming, Katie Bowker, 4-H Tech Changemakers Program Coordinator, and Adam Hammond, Georgia 4-H Foundation Interim Director, and a Oconee County 4-H alum. We would also like to thank the Oconee County Board of Commissioners for hosting our presentation and supporting Oconee County 4-Hers like us. Thank you, and Alyssa.
As 4-Hers, every time we recite the 4-H pledge, we pledge our hands to larger service. While this can mean different things to different people, we believe that Charter, through their support of the Georgia 4-H Tech Changemakers program, perfectly embodies this part of our 4-H pledge. By partnering with Georgia 4-H, they are enabling rural communities across the state by helping bring technology into homes like ours. With their continued support, they are working hard to advocate and partner with Georgia 4-H and fill the need for accessible technology in rural households. In Georgia, the statewide team plans to serve 5,000 adults through workshops, virtual classes, informational sessions, and exhibits this year. Thank you again, Charter, for providing their support to a program that I am personally a part of and for making an impact on our state.
Thank y'all.
Thank you. All right, so our next item is the update on the Charter Spectrum Broadband Project. Ms. Catherine.
Hello again. Thank you for having me again. So on behalf of Charter, I'm pleased to offer a progress update on our partnership with y'all to expand rural broadband throughout the county. So as you know, we signed a contract with the county back in November of 21 to provide access to households. Additionally, Charter has also received money from the federal government through the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund to provide broadband service to approximately 900 more locations throughout the county during the same time as the Oconee funded build. So in order to understand the progress made to date, it's important to have an understanding of the process that it takes to deploy broadband infrastructure. So there's 6 distinct phases of Charter's build-out process. It begins with a walkout, design, permitting, make-ready, construction, and then activation. So much of the work and the timeline takes place during the walkout and design phases, which are not the shovel in the road phases, which is where we are going next. So during the walkout, Charter had crews cover the county to validate where the broadband needed to be deployed. The walkout phase for both the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund locations and the agreement with the county were completed this past October. Because of this work effort, Charter generated an address list to identify the specific locations that will receive service under this agreement. We are finishing validating the last 100 or so locations. So the majority of the address list and where it's going to go has been identified. We're down to the very little end piece. So currently, the Oconee project is in the design and field verification stage. At this point, Charter is finalizing the routes and the schema for how the infrastructure will be deployed. This is complete for the majority of the county-funded project. While these 6 phases that I described in terms of the walkout, design, permitting, make-ready, construction, activation take place in a linear manner, the project's divided into different geographical areas as it gets built out. So that we can proceed as quickly as possible once the walkout and design have been finalized. So Charter's construction will include the deployment of aerial and underground infrastructure. That means that one critical step in our process is to gain access rights to the right-of-ways, easements, and utility poles. At this point, Charter submitted a number of permits, close to 42, with more to come over the next few months. These permits are for both pole attachments and state right-of-way use. We have also confirmed the required utility pole owners we will need to attach to, which are Georgia Power, Walton EMC, Georgia Department of Transportation, and AT&T. We are meeting with these stakeholders to plan our construction paths and make ready needs. We are optimistic that our infrastructure partners are going to help us stay on track to get this build done for the county. So once we've received our permits back, we'll move it to the make ready and construction portions of the project. I'm excited to announce that we've identified where we'll be placing our first equipment cabinet from which Charter will run its fiber backbone. This will be in the Bishop area in the southern portion of the county. We expect this to be placed by year's end. The cabinet will house the electronics that will support the new fiber that Charter will be installing throughout the project area. And then for perspective, the equipment that we place in this cabinet will support broadband service for 700 homes within Oconee County. And our second cabinet that will go in down the road a few miles will be at approximately 3,500 more homes within the county. So we are moving along on schedule and physical construction to the customer premise that is targeted to begin early 2023 with our first customers coming online shortly after that. As a practice, we've been doing press releases to make the market aware of the serviceability. We want your constituents to know that we're there. And as we get closer to turn up dates, we would love to coordinate with you on planned communications to Oconee citizens. So thank you for the opportunity to provide this update. I'm happy to take any questions you all might have.
I do have maybe one or two. I noticed in the paper that the state of Georgia was in line to receive, I think, 250 million of the printed money that's coming out of DC for broadband in the rural area. Would what we're doing, what you're doing, what we
Mhm.
contract with, will that get everybody taken care of?
The 250 million or what the
No,
county's
what we're
doing with us?
right now, because my question then would be, we be available to receive any of the other funds?
The goal of the project is to have the county blanketed with broadband service, right? So of course, we might get to 99.9% and there might still be a 0.01%, right? That we need some additional help to get to. But the goal of the agreement with the county is to get it done. But you're right, there is a lot more broadband money flowing down if that's needed.
So what do you see as far as the entire project? How long do you think that's gonna take?
I hesitate to give a firm timeline, and honestly, I don't have a firm one to give you in terms of when will it be concluded. I can tell you we want to do it as quickly as possible because we'd like to get customers online as quickly as possible. So, we're going to start construction early 2023, right? And then move from there. So much of the work, it's like an iceberg, right? So much of the work is taking place kind of behind the scenes. But once we get out there and cruise in the field, it starts running.
I noticed some infrastructure going on Highway 441.
Mhm.
Is that the charter?
It could be. I can check with our construction crew. We're not the only ones out there, right? But it's a possibility for sure.
So is the cabinet in Bishop, is that cabinet gonna be 360? Is it gonna go out 360 or is it just gonna go one direction?
Good question. I will find out. It's the cabinet. It holds all the electronics that then feed the fiber that's going out to the locations that don't have service. So whether or not that's like moving in one direction, right, or all around it, I would have to ask our team.
So if somebody didn't enter their information on our little sheet and it didn't make it to you, but you go right past their house, you're still gonna hook them up?
I mean, if they're there and
Very
they're reachable, we want them,
Very
right?
good. Thank you.
So every house is gonna have fiber as opposed to copper?
Correct. We don't build copper. This is a fiber to the premises build.
Okay.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all.
Our next item is the audit report for FY 2022. Clay?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, commissioners, for having Rushton back to do your audit for 2022. You should have with you quite a bit of awesomeness, goodies here that you have. I know that you're excited to read. You've got a presentation, of course, it's going to be on the screen as well. You should have a bound annual financial report. And then there's a couple letters as well, or at least one letter you have that I'll need to quickly touch on as well. That I don't think I added into the presentation. I did not. All right, so before I get started on talking through a few numbers in the presentation there, I want to first thank, as I mentioned, you all for having us to do your audit, but also your team. Obviously, we bother your finance people quite a bit more than we bother others, but we do interact with a lot of employees, not just in finance. We speak with all the constitutional officers. We speak with many different departments, and we're very appreciative of their assistance. They're also very helpful. And while we ask for a lot of information, ask a lot of questions, they do it with smiles. So we're very appreciative of that. And you got great folks in place. I know you know that, but we want to thank them from an audit perspective, because we do uncover a lot of rocks, ask a lot of questions, request a lot of documentation. So we're appreciative of that. So I've got a few numbers here just to go through a little small presentation here in regards to the financial report. The first slide talks about our audit opinion. That audit opinion, our independent auditor's report, is found on pages 1 through 3 of the large bound annual financial report you have there. There is actually a change with that letter this year. Nothing really changed in regard to what's in the letter. It mostly changed was the structure of the letter. So when you think about an independent auditor's report, you know, what is that letter for? I mean, it's where your audit opinion is found. Well, previously that audit opinion is a 3-page letter. That audit opinion was sunk, I want to say, at the bottom of the first page, top of the second page, according to how much funds and such you have going on. But this new audit guidance made us move that opinion to the very first thing in the report. So I actually changed the presentation to also move it to the front of the page here, or the top of the page. So the very first thing you see now there is our opinion, and I'm pleased to present that for 2022. We do have an unmodified or clean opinion, and nothing came to our attention during the audit process that would prohibit us from issuing an unmodified opinion. We do, with you being a county, we do follow government auditing standards in our audit. And so obviously with being a county, we do follow good. It is government auditing standards. This letter also spells out who's responsible for your financial statements. So these financial statements are the responsibility of the county's management. We, as your auditor, are responsible for opining upon, give an opinion on those financial statements, that they are not materially misstated, whether due to error or fraud. That is, again, not materially misstated. We don't look at every transaction. Your finance folks back there probably might disagree with that. They probably feel like we look at every transaction you have, but we do look at a good many and do provide reasonable assurance that they are not materially misstated. All right, in this entire bound report you have here, rather lengthy, as you can see, there are 2 statements in there, and only 2 statements in there, that pull all activities of the county together in one on the full accrual basis of the county. So when you think about your funds that you all talk about throughout the year, you spend most of your time with the general fund, which we'll talk about here in a moment, because that's, of course, the chief operating fund of the county. But you also talk some about SPLOST funds, your water and sewer enterprise fund. And so these 2 statements are the only statements in that entire report that have all those activities together in one. That's your statement of net position, pages 15 to 16. It's going to be similar to a balance sheet for business enterprise, and the statement of activities on page 17 is going to be similar to an income statement for business enterprise. A few numbers from those statements. I've got a 3-year history for you here on net position or equity of the county. You will see there for 2022, the county had net investment in capital assets of $163,231,703. That's going to be land, buildings, equipment, less accumulated depreciation on those assets, less any debt utilized to acquire those assets. Restricted net position. This is going to be residual items you were holding still at year end that were restricted from an outside source. A good example of that's going to be SPLOST funds. When you receive those SPLOST dollars, of course, you're required to expend those in accordance with the referendum. So those monies are restricted for those purposes. So at the end of the year, it was $13,268,399. And then the remaining there unrestricted net position of $23,609,750 gives your total net position $200,109,852. For the year, there was an increase in net position of $9,953,648. And I've got a few items listed there below, as you'll see there, kind of explaining your change in net position and some changes from the prior year. Sales tax being up pretty substantially, which is what we're seeing really across the board throughout the state, or for most North Georgia counties and cities, at least for that matter. The next slide looks at the general fund. Again, I mentioned, of course, that's the chief operating fund found on pages 24 and 25. For the year, for 2022, revenues increased 452,527, or about 1.2%. Contributing to that increase, property taxes increased 1,134,685. TAVT, your title ad valorem taxes increased 129,229. Sales tax there, local option sales taxes increased 658,274. The special purpose local option sales tax also increased this year. I don't have that number right in front of me, but it also increased similar percentages, obviously. Building permits increased 202,722. Intergovernmental revenues, now this is in the general fund alone here we're talking, they decreased in the year 1,800,199. As you recall, last year, you all received money from the CARES Act relief fund. Those funds were accounted for in the general fund. So that those funds were not in the general fund for 2022. Now, you did receive money from the American Rescue Plan Act, but those are required to be accounted for in a separate fund. So they're in the American Rescue Plan Act fund. So for the year, your intergovernmental revenues decreased a little over 1.8 million. Expenditures decreased 1,016,071, or about 3.1%. A few departments here, human resources increased 563,67 due to some retiree retirement contributions. Public Works Department decreased 2,396,813. Road maintenance in the prior year was up a little more in the prior year was up. Telecommunications Department increased 688,500 due to contract services, likely related to what we were just discussing earlier. All right, general fund revenues expenditures we just talked about. This is the last 3 fiscal years there in a chart format for you there, line graph, so you can see rather than me just talking and you looking at numbers, it's kind of got you a little trend there as far as your and by the way, this includes the green line there includes transfers out as well, rather than just being revenues and expenditures. We do include transfers out, and the reason we oftentimes include those, and I don't necessarily have the transfers in, is because you typically, pretty much all counties have some budgeted transfers for several other funds you're having to support, such as 911 is a great example, solid waste sometimes, but 911 being a great example of often having transfers to the general fund. So it's important to oftentimes include those with your expenditures. So you'll see there 50,679,779, revenues being 38,625,824. Now for 2022, that's a little misleading, and I should have footnoted this at the bottom here. There was a large transfer out of the general fund over to the local resources fund as for the future capital projects, assigned fund balance there. So makes it look like you spent 50 million and only received 38 million, but that's got a $16 million transfer, if I recall, somewhere in there. So all right, the next chart here, nice colorful chart for you there, is revenues and other financing sources. So here are your funding sources for the general fund. Obviously, the largest, as with most all counties, is property tax at 39%. However, your sales tax, your local option sales tax there at 21%. And then from there, it goes to the title ad valorem and then charges for services there in that funding, and several other smaller funding sources, as you can see there. Next slide, looking at the expenditures and other financing uses. Again, transfers out are the largest part this year, but that's all due to that one, as I mentioned earlier, transfer over for future capital projects. Your public safety, 19%, typically always the largest part of an organization or a county's, or really any government's expenditures. You got public works at 13, general government at 13%. Next slide looking at is your Department of Water Resources Fund. You'll see that's found on page 30 of the bound report. Operating revenues for the year increased 1,452,990, or about 12.9%. Contributing to that increase, you had water sales increasing 498,344 and sewer sales increased 947,268. On the expense side, your operating expenses also increased. They increased 319,403 or about 3.7%. Contributing to that increase, cost of sales and services, obviously with the revenues being up, your cost of sales and services is going to be up as well. Increase 105,596. Personal services increased 143,700. And depreciation on capital assets we talked about earlier increased 70,107. I mentioned SPLOST several times. I mentioned it's up. Obviously, in your report, you're probably aware the very last page of the report, actually might be the next to last couple pages in the report, is your schedule of projects financed with special purpose local option sales tax. And a mouthful there, but that's basically going to give you details of your expenditures based on the referendums for those approved expenditures. So it spells out, there are still three open referendums, although a couple of those are being spent down as you move forward there. But in total, the county expended 6,401,275. 116,070 was for 2004 referendum. 5,015,774 was your 2015 referendum, and then 1,269,431 was for the new referendum, 2021 referendum there. All right, these next two slides, I mentioned my independent auditor's report. In the report was pretty much the first 3 pages of that annual financial report. There are only 2 other letters or 2 other pieces, I guess, parts of that report that are really product of ours, that are not necessarily your financial statements. These are ours as your auditor. That's our report on internal control and other matters found on pages 109 and 110. This is, as we follow government auditing standards, we are required to consider your controls and compliance. Pleased to present that we have no material weaknesses in internal controls. We have 1 significant deficiency and no issues or instances of material non-compliance that we noted in the controls of the county. The third letter is our report on compliance and internal controls over major programs. We did have to perform a single audit last year. We did have to perform a single audit this year, and that's why this third letter is required. So in any given year in which the county expends more than $750,000, we are required as your auditor to perform a single audit on just those federal dollars on the major programs. That's something we've seen quite often here lately with even smaller cities and counties with all of the influx of federal funds from the federal government. So we are seeing more and more single audit, more and more compliance testing in that regard. But we did perform a single audit for 2022. And I'm pleased to present there that we had no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies, and no instances of material non-compliance that were noted in your controls and compliance over your major federal programs. All right, couple of try to keep you all as a governing body abreast of any significant changes that are coming in relation to accounting standards. You all that have been here for any length of time know that I've been talking about this first one here for many years, that it was coming. We got hurt a little bit by COVID. Not that COVID didn't do much worse than accounting standards. I know, don't want to take that lightly, but it did postpone this one for several years. So I feel like I've been teaching on this one since I started my career. At least 8 years. I've probably taught this about GASB 87 20 times, it seems like, over the last 8 years. But the day is here. We've implemented this year. It didn't end up not having a significant effect on Oconee County. And when I talked to you about it previously, I did tell you we would have to evaluate materiality. And so that was a factor in these. You had several leases that were ending right after year end or had ended right before year end. And so the net present value of future lease payments on those was not material. So there's no use going through the motions here to book these liabilities and these right to use intangible assets if we're going to turn around and take them off, or if the amount's immaterial. So that's and then on the lessor side, where you have some leases for various buildings and such, those were either the same way or there were reasons why they did not get, there's all types of, a lot of the work here is involved is determining if it applies, if the guidance applies. And that's actually the first thing this standard does, is defines what is a lease. And that's what I've been saying for years is you may not call it a lease, it may meet the definition. There's also the chances where you may call it a lease and it don't meet the definition. So that's or it could meet the definition of a lease, but have some type of terms that require it not to be recorded. For example, if there is a lease in which you have both the lessor and the lessee have a right to terminate that lease, doesn't mean that they are going to terminate it, or they have, or in the future they're going to. But if you both have, if the lessor and the lessee both have a right to terminate, and without cause, or oftentimes they'll say either party can terminate with a 60 days notice. When a case like that, standard says that max lease term of that lease is only 60 days, because at any point either party could terminate. Has to be both. Then that's only 60 days, and short-term leases, those with terms less than 12 months, do not meet this criteria, so they're not to be reported. So that's just one example, but there was a lot. It's almost like I'm hurt, but I'm not. There was a lot of work that went into saying we didn't record any leases here, but there were no leases recorded as far as liabilities, intangible right to use assets, lessee receivable, lease receivables, deferred inflows of resources, all those accounting terms that ended up not applying. So the significant change for you guys for this year were some disclosure changes in the report. However, this doesn't end now. This is a new standard. It's not just a one and done. So while those other leases were ending, they're most likely going to be replaced by other new leases, and those will likely or could likely be material. So we'll be future recording for those. Flipping on to the next one, and kind of segues right into it. So that was the current reporting changes. You have future reporting changes. Actually, this fiscal year you're in now, fiscal year 23, and it's almost identical. So it's almost the same thing. You know, we talked about leases to a blue in the face. Now we've got what we're going to call SBITAs, as they call them, which is SBITAS, which is subscription-based information technology arrangements. So what we're talking about in this regard is, as you all know, especially IT folks know, the many softwares or not even softwares, IT in general is moving more toward a subscription base. So you can no longer buy, go get your CD-ROM and buy software and stick it in your computer, and then stick it in your other computer, and then your other computer, and then let your neighbor use it. And no longer works that way. It's been moving away from that for some time, but now it's moving into where everything is just purchased on a subscription base. So it's, you pay a monthly fee or an annual fee and you subscribe. So with that, there's really not a tangible item, although really before you really didn't have a tangible item either. The disc really wasn't relevant. It was what was on the disc. But these intangible items, these softwares that are purchased on a subscription base, they're GASB saying that's, should be recorded. So there's a chance, again, materiality will be a factor, but there's a chance, and these are accounted for pretty much identical the way we talked about those leases are going to be accounted for. So for example, if you have a software that is material, as far as your future payments, future subscription payments, if it's material and it's based on net present value payments, then you would have to record that as an intangible right to use asset there, and amortize that over the lease or the term of the lease, or in this case, the arrangement, and you book a liability for that. So that's 23 evaluation there. And I should mention one other thing here before I conclude. When we talked about those leases and whether it's material or not, so we evaluate those individually. So if you have a lease, we evaluate it. Okay, that's the total payments when you book them based on net present value on the incremental borrowing rate. It's immaterial. We had to do more than just evaluate that individual lease. We had to also compile all of those to make sure, okay, that one was individually immaterial, but in the total, they were immaterial as well in financial statements. So same will apply here as far as what's material and what's not. So, and that concludes my presentation. I do have a couple other quick things to mention, but that concludes, as far as the numbers are concerned, that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
I got one.
Yes, sir.
cause I get asked as well as my colleagues, what is our fund balance? I'm looking at a number, but you tell me if I'm right, it's on.
All right, so when you say fund balance, let's make sure I'm clear on, when you say, are you talking about fund balance of the general fund? Okay, so fund balance of the general fund, you can find that on page 18. And the total fund balance of the general fund is currently 10,411,674. Found second line up there on page 18. 10,411,674. Of that, it's broken down in several different categories there, but in unassigned fund balance there, you'll see right one line above it's 10,201,76.
That's what
Of the general fund. Yes, sir.
some people get it confused. Think you have a lot more money, but I want to make sure folks understand that's what you found.
That's right. Yeah, now there's fund balances obviously in other funds, but the fund balance currently of the general fund is 10,411,674. Right.
Go already tied up.
That's right.
Rush to cover a disaster.
Operating funds, a reserve, so to speak. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, and there were some additional funds there in fund balance, of course, that were set aside for future projects that are not in the general fund. So, yes, sir. Great questions. Any other questions I can answer?
Well, same line, what Mr. Horton asked, what is it, has that changed any as far as what y'all would recommend that we hold in that unrestricted category?
No, we're still seeing GFOA, which is the Government Finance Officers Association, still recommends 2 to 3 months operating expenses or annual expenditures.
So you find that in compliance?
Yes, I actually did not. That's not in the presentation. I did not. I can run that real quick. You could take just, you think I'd be great with numbers, right? You take the 10,201 there and divide it by 31,275. That's about a third. So you're looking at about 4 months right there, just off estimate off the top of my head there.
So that's not excessive.
Absolutely not. No, I 2 to 3 months is what, that's the recommended, but that don't mean 4 is too much for sure. I mean, I've got clients that have 6, 8, 10. Yeah, I've got some that have way more than that too, but then it starts getting in too much, but definitely not 4 for sure. Not too much.
So what you're saying to the taxpayers is we're not holding more than what you.
Absolutely not. No, you're good. You're not holding too much. You don't hold an excess. And I was trying to get my number here exactly, just so I could give you that while we're standing here. Of course, it's important to also know this isn't perfect science as far as reserve, but 3.26 is what I calculate there. If you quickly, it's a quick number there. Reason I say it's not perfect science, that's unassigned fund balance. GFOA technically recommends unrestricted fund balance. In this regard, though, in the general fund, you have no restricted, so unassigned and unrestricted are the same number. But that is a moving number. It's very difficult when your constituents or anybody, or even if you all ask finance, what's our fund balance? What kind of reserve is that? That number today is different from that day tomorrow, is different from the day the next day, because your numerator and your denominator there are constantly changing. That's based on what your expenditures were for 2022 and what your fund balance you're holding was as of the end of 2022. You may have $2 million of let's just say payroll costs are increasing across the board for everywhere we see. Your payroll costs next year could be up $2 million. That expenditure number, which is the bottom number, is going up. If that's obviously probably could be lowering the top number. So it's double whammy there. So your fund balance can change very, daily is what I'm trying to say. It's very difficult.
This way, because we got a town hall coming up. Not
Yes,
too
sir.
long. You didn't find us squirreling away $32 million, dude.
No.
I didn't think you did, but sometimes people get confused.
No, did not find squirreling away 32 million. No, I'd be a little more frowny and less smiling. Wouldn't be.
You answered it.
Yes,
Perfect.
yes, sir. All right. Any other questions? There we go. That was a great question, great discussion. I like the fund balance discussion. Nothing like taking an accountant who loves black and white, who loves exact and saying, hey, tell me about this fund balance that's, changes by the minute. It's changed since we just last discussed it a minute ago. It's changing. We don't even know it yet. No, I kid. It is very important. That is the because it is something citizens, when it comes to tax, that's what are we being overtaxed? Are we being, that's right. This is their money. Exactly right. So. All right. One of these letters you have here at the top, it says in underline, it says significant audit matters. So before I alarm you, there's no significant audit matters. That used to say significant audit findings, and I'm so thankful they changed that letter, because I'd be up here saying, hey, look at this letter, it says significant audit findings. And I'm like, everybody's eyes. This right here is boilerplate information. I am required to communicate to you all as the board charged with governance. I am required to communicate everything in this letter. Now, I'm going to be like that guy on the end of commercial on TV and talk so fast that you won't understand what I'm saying, but I'm going to quickly run through this thing. Matter of fact, I'm really not going to touch on the whole thing. I just want to call your attention to a few things in here. This letter is where I tell you that that GASB 87, which we've already talked about, was implemented this year. New accounting standards. Your other accounting policies are found in note 2. I always recommend that's your nighttime read when you're struggling to sleep. Crack that one open and away you go in no time. There are estimates in these financial statements. Pretty much all financial statements have estimates. We've got a few estimates there we feel like are the most sensitive. Your life expectancy, your capital assets, as far as how long they're depreciated, and your allowance for doubtful accounts on any property tax or utility receivables. I stood up here very first thing, talked about how helpful your staff were. I think by now, we did not encounter significant difficulties in dealing with management or performing our audit. We didn't have any disagreements with management, didn't require any kind of second opinion on anything we did. Probably the most important thing in this letter, in my opinion, is found in the second paragraph there on the second page, management representations. So we, as I've said many times, we ask a lot of questions. We request a lot of documentation. This letter, it refers to here, the management representation letter is signed by management that says that they did not withhold anything from us or not answer anything clearly, intentionally, to the best of their abilities that may change our opinion on the financial statements. And we do have that letter signed in our files. And that pretty much concludes this information in this letter, but take a look at it. Again, it's just required communications. I'm required to communicate everything in that letter to a T, with the exception of changing dates, and GASB 87, which we've talked about at length, is the exact same wording it was last year. So not one bit of difference. And that concludes my presentation.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, now we'll move into our hearings and actions on zoning matters. Our first rezone is P 22-0231 Epsbridge Parkway LLC. This is B2 to OIP. It's 8.78 acres at 1083 Parkway Boulevard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Again, your first rezone is rezone P 22-0231 Epsbridge Parkway LLC, applicant owners. This is located along Parkway Boulevard next to Coles. It is C01Z007. It's currently zoned B2 in the regional center character area. And again, the request is to rezone the property from B2 to OIP in order to develop a rehabilitation hospital. This is the concept plan that you have in your application packets, slightly larger version. These are the architectural images submitted with the application. And staff recommends conditional approval with our 3 standard conditions. The Planning Commission recommends approval with the same conditions. Thanks.
Yes, sir. Come on up.
Good evening. Frank Pittman. I live at 1400 Saxon Road, near Bishop. So hopefully my address is on the list. So hopefully got some good news earlier tonight. So and obviously as a Oconee resident, I'm really excited about that and happy you guys are working on that deal with them. So as Mr. Herring mentioned, this property is Parkway Boulevard, right behind Coles. Currently zoned B2. It was zoned 17 years ago when the Coles complex was done. It's kind of sat all this time because when all that was done, Coles was given the right to say yes or no to anything that came along, and they've said no over and over and over to many folks that have come along. This project has come along, Encompass Health, who is the largest rehabilitation hospital folks in the country, are collaborating with Piedmont to build this facility. It'll be up to 80 beds, up to 120 employees that build out with a approximately $40 million investment in Oconee County. They are a publicly traded company, got 150 locations in 35 states and Puerto Rico. They got 4 other locations in Georgia currently, with approximately 33,000 employees. So, I mean, they've done this a lot. They want to build a rehabilitation hospital. This is not drug and alcohol rehabilitation. This is everything from car accidents to people recovering from strokes. It's physical rehabilitation. They match the regional center character area that they're in. The staff has recommended approval, and so has the planning commission. I'll be brief and answer any questions. We've got 3 representatives from Encompass here as well. If y'all got any questions for them, and I'll open it up for questions now. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak for the rezone? Anyone virtually? Does anyone wish to speak against? Anyone virtually? Okay, we'll go ahead and close the public comment portion, open up to questions from commissioners. We'll entertain a motion on this one.
I'll make a motion to approve rezone number P 22-0231 Epsbridge Parkway LLC B2 to OIP plus or minus 8.78 acres, 1083 Parkway Boulevard with 3 conditions.
Second.
Here we have a motion and a second to approve rezone P 22-0231 with 3 conditions. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. Next item is variance number P 22-0239. This is a special exception variance for a driveway at 1171 Founder's Lake Drive.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, again, this is variance P 22-0239. Dr. Marcus Rapaz, owner. This is located at Founder's Lake, parcel number B 04H048A. Currently zoned R1 in the suburban neighborhood character area. And again, the request is a variance to UDC section 101202D 2 and 3 to add a second concrete driveway on the property to connect the basement garage to Founder's Lake Drive. This is the exhibits that you have in your packets to show the additional driveway. Another architectural image exhibit showing the access to the basement. And staff recommends approval. It does meet all necessary conditions to grant the variance with the 1 condition. Thank you.
Now we're here from the owner or the agent of the owner. Would you like to say anything?
Good evening, commissioners. Great meeting all of you. I have really not much more to add. I think Mr. Herring summarized the case very clearly, and since brevity is of the essence, I think I'm just ready here to answer any of your questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anyone else wish to speak for? Anyone virtually? Does anyone wish to speak against? Anyone virtually? With that, we'll go ahead and close public comments. Any questions from commissioners? We'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion we approve special variance P 22-0239 Marcus Rapaz special exception for driveway plus or minus 0.7 acres, 1171 Founder's Lake Drive with the 1 condition.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve variance P 22-0239 with 1 condition. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. Thank you. Next item is the announcement of the Democratic and Republican appointees to the Oconee County Board of Elections and Registration. We received communication from the Democratic Party to continue with Ken Davis. Also, the Republican Party has communicated they're going to continue with Kirk Shook. So that's just an informational announcement there. Next item is consider appointments to the Oconee Industrial Development Authority.
Make a motion to appoint Brock Tool and Rick Waller.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. Next item is consider appointments to the Farmland Preservation Committee.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion, we appoint Lisa H. Dawson and Michael Ransom to fill these two positions. Second. Oh, go ahead.
Okay. Here we got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. Next time is discuss and consider the facilities fiber bid. Alex.
Good evening, Commissioners. In order to best provide internet service to the new administrative building and build additional network redundancy, staff plans to run a county-owned fiber line from the Oconee County Courthouse to the new administrative building. In pursuit of this, we released an RFP and received 4 responses. After discussing, the RFP committee unanimously recommended High Tech Utility Construction to win the bid. Their bid to complete the project was for $101,317.45. This is a listed SPLOST 21 project, but is not currently budgeted for in this fiscal year. Approval of this project will require an approval of a budget amendment to allocate funding for this fiscal year from SPLOST 21's broadband distribution. And also, in the interest of getting ahead of lead times for materials and equipment, I would ask that the board consider moving on this tonight so that we can issue the notice to proceed and the company can go ahead and order the materials and equipment. While the proposed schedule from the High Tech Utility Construction company puts the project completion before our deadline of March 31st, I would also ask if the board would approve with the condition of approval of budget amendments as necessary for the life of the project up to the contract amount, in case a horrible circumstance does cross fiscal years. Altogether, staff recommends approval of the bid from High Tech Utility Construction, along with approval of the allocation of funding from SPLOST 21 and approval of budget amendments as necessary for the life of the project up to the contract amount. Thank you for your consideration. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions on this one? Thank you, sir. Do we have any public comment? Anyone virtually? Okay. We'll entertain a motion at this time.
I'll make a motion that we approve the High Tech Utility bid as stated, and we approve also the budget amendments as needed for the life of the contract.
Yeah, we have a motion second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. Does any commissioner wish any item to be removed from the consent agenda? We'll entertain a motion on consent.
Make a motion to approve the consent items as presented.
Second.
Here we have a motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. We do not have need of an executive session. So Commissioner Saxon.
Motion adjourned.
Second.
Okay, we are adjourned.